Are you ready to teach online? In the last video, I talked about the 6 steps you can take to transform your face-to-face class to an online course. If you haven't watched that video, please click the link in the description box. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I apply the 6 steps to the course I'm now teaching at the University of the Philippines. Hi, I'm Doc Almond, a curriculum and e-learning specialist. Welcome to my channel devoted to helping teachers like you teach at the time of COVID-19. Thank you for hitting play on this video. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do. Stay tuned because I'm going to keep giving you more tips and tricks in the coming episodes. Full disclosure, even if I have all my e-learning credentials, the truth is I'm just a teacher with all the same apprehensions and concerns about remote learning. It's actually the first time I'm teaching a fully online class. So watch until the end of this video to see how I faced the initial challenges of creating an online course. Last July, I was asked to teach Communication 100 to undergraduate students at the College of Mass Communication at UP. The truth is, I could have said no, but then I felt the pressure of actually walking my talk. During e-learning webinars, I encourage Filipino teachers to go ahead with online learning despite its difficulty and its complexity, because really, we can do it. Here we go! Step 1 in transforming your course is actually the same step that you take when you prepare for each school year or each semester. You collect and review all the materials you have at hand. Now this is the punchline. After I unearthed all my old files, I realized that the last time I taught Communication 100 was in 2006, 14 years ago. Wow, diba? Back then, Facebook and YouTube were in the beginning stages, so definitely all of the materials that I had were quite outdated. So what I did was I asked the department to provide me with the most recent course outlines used by the other faculty members. The easiest way to build a course is to draft a course outline. So what I did was I looked at all the outlines I had, my own and the ones that were given to me by the department, and I came up with a temporary list of learning objectives. And these were the learning objectives I had to make sure were still aligned with 21st century learning. For basic education teachers, you're already provided with MELCs, or the most essential learning competencies. But for me, I had to make sure that I paid attention to the 4 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication. And you can do that by referring to Bloom's taxonomy, where you can find action verbs that you can use for your learning objectives. Make sure that you use higher order thinking skills for this. Okay, now here's a practical tip for you. The Arizona State University actually provides us with a free app, which is called the Learning Objectives Builder. I'll provide you the link in the description box so you can access it. The app has 3 easy steps to guide you in building your learning objectives. You begin by choosing a cognitive domain. Of course, I will still encourage you to target higher order thinking skills. These are analyzing, evaluating, and creating. But you may still include lower order thinking skills such as remembering, understanding, and applying. Then the builder will provide you with several verbs in this cognitive domain. The good thing about looking at verbs is actually you might get a few ideas on new learning objectives you can include. The third and final step would have you complete your learning objective. The good thing about the app is that it actually gives hints by providing samples of learning objectives. Since Common 100 is an introductory course, I had to include lower order skills such as remembering the definition of communication. The only problem with that is that it actually doesn't include a lot of critical thinking. So I referred to the app and decided to choose the Analyze Cognitive Dimension. The app provided me with a list of verbs, and there I found the verb to question. And it gave me an idea. Since we have social media now, I can have my students question the relevance of the term mass communication. That would certainly require my students to use critical thinking to figure out if the word mass communication is something that is still useful in this day and age. The Learning Objectives Builder was very useful for me to come up with a better set of learning objectives. Learning objectives are very important. They allow us to measure learning and ensure that understanding actually happens. They also determine the kind of content, activities, and assessments that will be useful in your course. Step 2 is to chunk your course into bite-sized pieces. In the previous video, I said that there are 2 ways to chunk your course. The first is to pay attention to the time it will take for your students to finish one learning unit. Pre-COVID, I would meet my class once a week for 3 hours. But because I'm already shifting to online learning, I'm thinking of combining synchronous and asynchronous learning. So instead of meeting my class 3 hours online, I'm probably just going to meet them for a maximum of 1 hour a week. The rest of the week, I'm going to assign my students to work with each other, do learning activities, and read or view materials. Another way to chunk your course is to pay attention to the amount of information in each learning week. Since I already drafted smaller units based on my weekly load of information, it is now up to me to decide if it is too much or too little. Just keep in mind that you have to be practical in terms of what your students and you can fulfill throughout the week. Please note that although this is step 2, you will probably have to revisit chunking your course later on. That's because e-learning development is really an iterative process. It's a repetition of development and improvement. Step 3 is to add and hyperlink multimedia content. Using your learning objectives, you can now start building your course by including course materials. I actually enjoy hunting down good materials online. After all, our new role as teachers in the 21st century is to curate knowledge. I like using the citation option in Google Scholar to use for my references. And then I hyperlink to the URL. This is better than downloading the file and then uploading again on the internet or sharing as is. As you go through your learning objectives, you might find that you need more than just text content. So that means you should include visuals like infographics or videos. So please don't discount YouTube and Pinterest. Let me explain why I prefer hyperlinking content rather than downloading and then uploading or sharing scanned material. Please be aware that fair use does not apply to e-learning. The freedoms we usually experience when we are in our physical classrooms are not the same for online learning. In fact, internationally, the same rules and laws that are used for broadcasting and publication apply to e-learning. So to avoid unwelcome issues in terms of copyright and intellectual property rights, please avoid scanning materials and sharing them with your students. Instead, you can hyperlink whatever is already available online. Step 4 requires you to add digital activities. You have to still consult your learning objectives for this. And you can refer to Digital Bloom's taxonomy, which provides you with different kinds of digital activities organized according to lower order and higher order thinking skills. For example, in COM 100, I usually ask my students to submit reflection papers. But this time, Instead of limiting them to written essays, they can either do a blog entry or shoot a vlog. Another digital activity I intend to assign my students would be the online bulletin board. So I've used this before in previous classes. Some semesters ago, one particular class suffered so many suspensions that we had to find a way to start classes even if we couldn't meet face-to-face. So what I did was I allowed them to read their materials and I posted on this bulletin board several questions that they were required to answer. Aside from posting their comments or feedback and answers to those questions, they were also required to respond to each other's posts. Make sure that your digital activities still align with your learning objectives. Also, you need to have 3 types of engagement in your course: between you and your students, between students and other students, and finally, between the students and the learning materials. Step 5 is to choose appropriate technology. What are the types of technologies you need for your course? First, you will need to keep in touch with your students. I prefer Viber. Of course, you can choose from different messaging apps. For my synchronous sessions, I plan to use Skype, but you can use Zoom or any video conferencing app. Then consider the technologies that your students will use to collaborate. You may give them a list of recommended apps, but still allow them the freedom to choose what they prefer. When choosing appropriate technology, remind yourself that your goal is for learning to happen. If the technology will only be a distraction or a difficulty for you and your students, it's better that you avoid using it. The final decision you need to make is where you're going to build your virtual classroom. Over the years, as technology evolved, I've used different platforms. I started with Yahoo Groups, if you still remember that. And then I migrated to Facebook, and then to Google Site. Google Site is the platform I now use for my virtual classroom. The final step is to build your virtual classroom. I'll be giving you a tour of my draft classroom. It may not have all the content that I intend to include, but I'll give you an idea of how it looks like. I have 5 basic pages. The home page will have the oblation as banner. It's where I'm going to welcome my students into my class. Another page is going to be called About This Course. I'll just provide background information such as learning objectives, assessments, activities, maybe deadlines. And I'm still thinking of whether or not I should give them a course outline. The truth is, I'm going to start this course without having completed my full planning. That's because I want to be flexible and adjust to my learners. The third page is called Course Materials and Activities. It's the main page of my virtual classroom. This is where my students and I will go through all the materials needed to complete the course. An added feature in the Google site is a table of contents, which allows you to navigate through materials easily through hyperlinks. As I mentioned before, my course will still be organized according to weeks, but instead of having only 1 session per week, I will actually have several sessions. For example, I will call each week a unit. So since there will be 14 weeks in our semester at UP, I will have 14 units. However, since I've chunked my content further into bite-sized pieces, I will label them with letters. So there will be Unit 2A to 2D, referring to chunks that are either synchronous or asynchronous. To make it easier for students to understand what they need to do, the title of each unit will start with a verb which tells them what they need to do. For example, read material, watch the video, attend an online session. I also made sure that I used pictures to reflect what they need to do. Like for our online sessions, I chose a picture of a computer beside an alarm clock. I'll be using the same photos in other units such that my students will easily understand what they need to do for each section. Then I will have a page for our recorded sessions. I still need to ask permission from my students if it's okay for me to do that. The main purpose is for those who are not able to attend to still watch what happened during our online sessions. Finally, I have a page called Learning and Sharing Gallery. This is where my students will upload their activities so that they can share them with other students. This is generally what I have right now. So as you can see, many spaces are still empty. I like how Google Site allows you to hide content. This gives me space to improve on my plan as I begin my classes. Honestly, I won't have a completed course at the start of the semester. It's wise to keep things flexible. The real adventure begins when our students join us for remote learning. Please stay tuned as I start vlogging my e-teaching experience. See you soon! Thanks for watching this episode. This is Doc Almond of our e-learning strategy PH, where we learn fast and teach smart.